So on page 4, we're going to be looking at what I call a pantry burrito wrap. I spend a lot of my time in areas where I didn't have access to fresh vegetables or a supermarket, so I did a lot of stuff with dry goods. This is a variation of something that I was eating on a regular basis for quite a while. So basically, you're just going to make a rice and beans dish. A lot of Mexican foods, rice and beans are pretty much staples there. So in this dish, we're making what I call a mock burrito or a burrito wrap. So basically, I just cook up the rice separately, and then I heat up the beans. Typically, I would use dry beans when I do mine, and because I'm using dry beans and I'm using brown rice when I typically do mine, I cook them together because they take a long, long time. But that also means they turn a little bit mushy. Not everybody likes a mushy texture when they're eating, so for today's recipe, I modified it a little bit. I'm using white rice just because it cooks up a lot faster, and you're getting a lot of fiber in the beans to begin with, so I'm not really concerned about having the brown rice instead of the white rice for this dish. I also know that not everybody likes the process of trying to do dry beans. It doesn't come out for everybody all the time, and it takes a little bit of prep time, so I substituted canned beans in for it. One note, when I use canned beans, I either buy the low sodium canned beans or I buy the regular canned beans and then I rinse them off first, just to get rid of a lot of that extra sodium. I also don't add any salt into the recipe at the end because I know I'm getting a lot of salt from the canned beans themselves. So basically, you'll see that I basically cook the rice. Once that's pretty much done, I'll start heating up the canned beans just so they're warming up at the same time. They're already cooked in the can, so I don't have to cook them very long. It's mostly just bringing them up to a temperature where they're nice and edible and they mix well with the rice. And then once the rice is pretty much done, I will start heating up some oil and I will mix in my seasonings in the oil. Oil helps a lot of seasonings bloom. Seasonings come in two varieties. There's the kind that release their compounds with water, water-soluble seasonings, and there's the kind that release their compounds in oil. So with chili peppers, I typically like to do it in oil. There's also a little bit of moisture in the rice and beans, so if there's anything in there that's water-soluble, that'll help too. But I just like to kind of bloom it in the oil first. Brings out some of the flavors, plus it mixes it with the oil, so that when I then mix that with the rice, I get that seasoning flavored throughout the entire rice mixture instead of just little dabs and dollops. So basically, cook up your rice, heat up your oil, add your seasoning. For this seasoning, I kept it a little on the mild side because I know not everybody likes spicy Mexican food. So I went basically with the generic chili powder that you can buy at Walmart and pretty much any grocery store. That's the base seasoning. To that, I like to add a little bit of cumin. I assume most of the base chili powder that you can buy already has some in it, but I like a little bit more in mine, so I add some extra to it. And then I also like to spice it up with a more flavorful chili. The chili powder itself has a nice pleasant flavor. It makes a nice good base. But if I want something a little extra, I'll typically go with either chipotle chili powder or cayenne chili powder. For today's recipe, I went with the chipotle. It brings out a nice little smoky flavor into it. Also adds a little bit of heat, so I kept that amount to a minimum for you guys. But it also means some of you might find this a little bland. That's okay. This is just the base mixture. This is the base for what I make. On top of that, then I'll start to add my toppings. I'll typically add some salsa to it at the end. Another good substitute for salsa is picante sauce. Has a slightly different taste. I tend to like it. I went with a nice mild one for today because I'm not sure if everybody's going to like a spicy picante. Then I just mix everything together, dollop it out. For today, we're using some nice soft taco shells. So you'll just take a scoop, dump it onto your soft taco shell. I'll typically wrap it and maybe fold one end that I'm going to hold in my hand, and then I'll eat from the other end to keep all the toppings from, or all of the filling from falling out. Other things you can do with it is add a little bit of fresh vegetables. Definitely kicks it up a notch and makes it taste a lot better. Also fresh chilies, if you have any fresh chilies. We've got a nice little garden plot that we're using here as part of the Family Services Center outside. And we actually went out this morning and picked some of our chilies. They're already starting to grow. So there's going to be a nice little tub if you want to sprinkle a little bit of fresh chili on yours when you're done. Cheese is another big one. The beans have no fat. The rice have no fat. I add a little bit of olive oil or vegetable oil, depending on what I have at the time, to add a little bit of fat to the meal. I always like to have at least protein, carbohydrates, and a tiny bit of fat in each meal I eat. Not too much, so this has got a little bit of olive oil, so it already has some fat in it, but the cheese itself is going to add a little bit more fat, so that's going to add a lot more flavor at the same time. So you can always put some extra toppings on. I also picked up some sour cream. A lot of people like sour cream on their Mexican dishes. I'm not a big fan myself. I try to avoid that much fat content. I'm already eating way too much cheese to begin with, so I don't want to have the sour cream on top of it. But you can just put whatever toppings you like on it. Just remember, you're starting with a nice healthy base, so you don't have to worry about that at all. You just keep an eye on what kind of toppings you're going to add to it, whether or not you want it to be really rich and flavorful or a little bit more mild and a little bit more healthy. Yeah, so pay attention to the types of chili powder you're using. Another really simple shortcut that I sometimes use if I'm not at home and I don't have access to all of my spices is I will just buy the generic taco seasoning mix that you can buy. It's already pre-mixed for you, gives you a nice Mexican flavor to it, and technically it's a taco seasoning instead of burrito seasoning, but it's essentially the same thing. So I will typically buy a bag of these. It's a little bit more convenient. Spencer's going to be sharing some secrets on how to make these from homemade. If I had known that when I was out in the bush, I would have really appreciated that. Because I didn't have access to these at the time, so I would just throw these in a bowl and eat them straight from a bowl without any kind of wrap at all. But when I did have access to a supermarket, I would just go out and buy the store-bought ones. And then they will keep fairly well in the refrigerator for quite a long time. The only thing you have to be careful with is once the package is open, if you don't close it up well enough, they will start to dry out and turn a little crusty. Heating them up might solve that problem, but since they're losing so much moisture, I don't think so. There are a lot of people who will take these and eat them straight out of the refrigerator. That's what I typically do. There are a lot of people, though, who like to throw them in a skillet with just a tiny bit of oil, heat them up, and they become much better at that point. Yep. For today, we're just going to go with a straight, plain, soft tortilla shell.
For those of you who are new, mine is a very simple recipe. Everybody else knows that already because I like simple. So if you are on page 5 in your book, I made the green enchilada chicken soup. So very, very simple thing. The biggest time with this is shredding the chicken after it's been in the crock pot. So you can see, if you look at the directions, there's 3 different ways for you to make it: the stovetop, slow cooker, or the Instapot, so that you have all those with you. I did mine in the slow cooker, and what I did yesterday before I went to work is you just put the chicken broth and the green enchilada sauce in the crock pot and all your chicken. And so you just let that, I just let it cook for 6 to 8 hours. When I got home from work yesterday, it took me the longest amount of time it took me to just shred it. And then this morning, I just stuck it back in the refrigerator because I wanted it for today, obviously. And then you just add your other ingredients. And so you can see that it's half and half or heavy cream. I used heavy cream. Monterey Jack cheese, the shredded cheese, cream cheese, and salsa verde, the green salsa. Put all that in, and I put that all in this morning with the shredded stuff, and it's just been on low all day long. So that's the nice piece. It's like I said, I only do simple. I left this, it's very mild, because I know with a large group and not everybody likes spice. If this was at home, I would definitely spice it up more because we like spicy. This is a double batch, so I did make a double batch because I knew we were having a large group. So this was an easy thing. It was nice that you can make it ahead of time, and like I said, the rest of it is simple. I've made this before, like when we've had people over, like football season. It's a nice, when we do that, we have soups or something at times. So this is an easy recipe for people. It makes it easy, and you can spice it up and add tortilla chips. You can add salsa, hot sauce. You can add sour cream. You can add avocado, cilantro, any of those things that you like. So I just kept it basic to let everybody give it a whirl. But that's what it was. It was 5 pounds. I used 5 pounds of chicken breast because I doubled the recipe. And so, like I said, the longest thing that it took for this whole soup was shredding the chicken after I, cooked it in the chicken broth, and enchilada sauce. So you eat, I don't do anything difficult. That's how I cook. Any questions?
Have you ever used a rotisserie chicken?
Rotisserie chicken would be great with this. I have not, just because, but if I had extra, yeah, that would be an easy thing to do because you just shred it as you go and put it in there. And that would cut down on, the 6 to 8 hours that needed just to cook the chicken breast. But no, I think that would be an easy thing to do.
So how long would you cook it?
I would think if you use a rotisserie chicken, then it's just basically getting it warm, everything warm enough. So it depends on the setting you use. For low, like you could probably just do a couple hours on low and it would be ready to go. Just to get everything heated all the way through and to give the cheeses a chance to melt.
Shredded, right?
Shredded, yes. Yep, I have a pack, let me. So yeah, you can get, this is the thick, like a little thicker. You can get the finely shredded, which would then melt easier. But that's what we had. So it works. That's the lot, this morning it was just a matter of letting it, so the cream cheese and the cheese would all kind of just melt in there and be nice and tasty.
So what I decided to do today is the soft wraps. It's in your books. On page 6. So initially I was going to call this a tortilla, but then I was talking to some people from Texas and Mexico, and they just looked at me, and I went, okay. It's now a soft wrap. So that way, something's beeping up. Oh, okay. So this is now a soft wrap. This is basically what they look like. I made a few. We'll give you, I'm even using clean tongs. Isn't that nice? See? So, okay. So we're going to go over the recipe. This is not hard. So if you want to try these at home, and I've made these for years, and this is also a great option for anybody that might want like a sandwich or wrap, but they don't want all that bread. This is a great option. If you do want to use them for a tortilla, I don't see why you couldn't. And they hold really, really well. When I did a test batch a couple of weeks ago, we made a double batch at the house. They lasted a week, no problem. And then we decided to feed the birds after that, so they were really happy. But all right. For those of you that are new, you probably don't know how crazy I am with my baking stuff. I'm one of those bread fanatic people. So I'm a King Arthur person. For this recipe, it has been designed for the red and white bag. Usually you see the blue and white bag, which is the bread flour. This is the all-purpose. They're all-purpose. This has a lot of protein content in it, where maybe like your Walmart, your Pillsbury, your Publix flour, all-purpose does not. So this really is a good option to keep these, give enough structure in them. So it's a little bit different when you go to make these. You're going to boil some water first, and you're going to take some of the flour, and you're going to put the boiling water on the flour, and you're going to mix it. And it's going to turn into glue. And you're going to go, oh, this is not going to work. So then you're going to let it cool for about a half hour, 45 minutes, because if you put yeast in hot stuff, you know what's going to happen, right? It's not going to work. So we want to make sure it's cooled down. If you're not sure and you got one of those thermometer things, stick it in there. Like last night, I did let it set for a half an hour, and I hit it with a thermometer, and it said 130 degrees. I thought it's a little warm yet. So I kind of flipped it over, and then gave it another 15 minutes, and I checked it again. It was down to about 100. So that's totally fine. We're not going to kill the yeast, right? There is yeast in this. The other thing you'll notice on page 6 in the ingredients, on the left-hand side, it has one of my favorite ingredients, instant potato flakes. It's a preservative. It keeps things moist, flexible, easy, just tender. So get you some dried potato flakes. I know for those of you, I keep talking about those rolls we did last November, the potato rolls everybody liked so well. It's the same instant potatoes you're using those, you're going to use in these. Salt, oil, and yeast. So basically, again, you're just going to boil some water. I did it in the microwave, throw it on the flour, get it going. Once it's cool, you're going to mix a little extra flour, the potato flakes, the salt, the yeast, and the oil, and then you can mix it. How many of you have a KitchenAid? About a quarter of you. Okay, use the dough hook. If you don't have a KitchenAid, not a problem. You're not going to have to go to the gym after this. This dough is real stiff, okay? So if you've ever made bread before and it's like, oh, it's nice and soft, no. This is going to be really, really stiff, so don't worry about it. You're going to stick it in the bowl, covered, leave it for an hour, go do something else. When you come back, it's going to soften up because the flour is going to have time to hydrate all that water. How many people are like serious about bread baking? Oh, there's the 2 or 3 people in Charlotte County that's doing bread. Okay. So this is an 83% hydration for any of you that are into bread stuff. That's a lot of water. But you'll find when you're making the dough, it's really stiff. And it's because this has a lot of protein in it for all purpose. So then basically you're going to divide it up. So what I did is I made a triple batch. I do everything by grams. I have the recipe I converted from cups and boil, all that stuff, teaspoons to grams. I weighed the entire amount of dough, divided it by 24 because I did this 3 times, and I came up with 90 grams. Now what you guys can't see is Suzanne sitting there rolling her eyes at me, okay? So I sat there and made sure they were all 90 grams, so they all came out the same. If you want to do that, fine. If you don't, that's fine. If you're just doing 8, it makes 8 if you do on this recipe. Then you're going to let them sit for about a half an hour after they're balled up. And then it's real simple. You're going to roll them out. You don't need any extra flour. You don't need to grease anything. They will not stick. At least they didn't for me, and they haven't for me ever. You can do it on your Formica countertop, or if you got something like this, I've not had a sticking problem. You just roll them out, and I would flip them over, roll them out some more, and make sure you get a circle instead of amoeba-looking shape, right? So that always helps. Now, to cook them, you got a couple of options. You can use a non-stick frying pan, no problem, on the stovetop. I've also used a cast iron, 12-inch cast iron skillet, worked really nice. When you got to make 24 of these, you got to get a little creative. So what I pulled out was this old Presto electric griddle we've had in the family for who knows what. When you plug it in, all the lights in the house dim. You know it's going to work, okay? It gets nice and hot. Crank it all the way up as far as it'll go, right? 400 degrees on the little dial for those of you that are familiar with it. It's great for pancakes, French toast, that kind of stuff. No oil, no grease, no nothing. Take them, roll them. You can put them 2 up if you get the larger, that's like 2 feet by 1 foot kind of is the size. About 2.5 minutes on a side, done. That's it. If you find it starts to get a little air pocket in it and starts to do this on you, I just take a little knife and pierce it, and you'll see the steam start to come out and they'll start to go back down. That's all there is to it. And then you let them, now let's say you got people coming over, maybe you're going to make one of these dishes and you want to use these as the vehicle to put everything in. If you, when they come off the griddle or the pan, whatever it is you're going to use, put them in a, some kind of, like I've got this on a sheet pan. If you take like a clean kitchen towel and keep them covered, they will stay warm quite a while, like for an hour under that cloth. So that's not a problem. And basically I just throw them in a Ziploc bag and I just keep them on the counter, on the kitchen. You could, if you want to extend them, you could freeze them, refrigerate them, that kind of stuff. If you want to make some ahead, if you got family coming. So that's an option. And that's basically it. It's really not that hard. I don't think I have any other notes for you. Make sure your yeast is not something you just found in the back of the cupboard since 1983, okay? Go out and buy like some fresh, real yeast. But yeah, if you do use a cast iron pan, we've got the stove that has the black coils on top, and that's not the flat top, but the one that's. So once the pan got hot, I found our stove goes from 1 to 10. I put it on like 3 or 4. That was perfect for getting these so you don't get them burnt on the outside and raw on the inside, and you don't dry them out either. So you may have to play with your stove, depending on the type of stove you've got, if you want to go that route. I did check. Walmart does sell a Mainstays griddle if you want to buy one of these things instead of buying the Presto brand, because that was like $60 for the Presto version. Walmart has their version for 20 bucks. So if you're looking for something and, you know, a griddle for some reason, maybe you have a lot of family come over for Sunday brunch kind of thing, and that could speed up your production, then maybe that's worth it for you. Okay, any other questions?
Have you ever tried it like with whole wheat flour or the alternative flours?
Great question. So for the folks at home, can you make this more healthy? Yes, you can replace, I would say, up to maybe half of this with the white or either the golden wheat or the whole wheat. So those of you that were here last month, right, we did the honey oatmeal bread. For those of you who remember that, right? And I had the other one of these. Absolutely, you could do that. I'd say try it. I would definitely try that golden wheat from King Arthur because it's whole grain, just like the regular whole wheat, but it doesn't have that heavy whole wheat flavor. So that would definitely be a great use application for that. But yeah, definitely change up the flour if you want to give a little extra nutritional value to it. That's a great suggestion.
So I made the Mexican street corn salad, which is on page 7. Super duper easy, following in Suzanne's footsteps. You're basically throwing everything in the bowl. That's really it. It's great for summer. You don't have to turn your stove on for anything. So what I did is I used frozen corn. So you throw that in the bowl. You throw the red onion in the bowl with the frozen corn, the jalapeno, the garlic, the cheese. That all goes in the same bowl. And you can use any type of Mexican crumbling corn. I like the brand Cacique. So that all goes in the bowl, and then in your separate bowl, you do the dressing. So you add your plain Greek yogurt, your mayo, paprika, chili seasoning, sea salt, pepper, and lime juice. You mix that all up, throw it in the bowl, and that's pretty much it. It's super duper simple. It stays, you know, I did this yesterday, so it's great to stay overnight. And it stays, I think the recipe says it stays in the fridge for up to 3 to 4 days. And I think it's even better today because all the seasonings mend together. What I like to do with the onion, which is a tip, sometimes I don't like the bite of the red onion so much. I think there's a little bit of a bite in this one though. You can soak it in water to kind of get rid of that bite a little bit, which I like to do. I was a little impatient last night, so I didn't let it sit for as long as I usually do. So there might be a bite. The jalapeno that I added does not have any of the seeds, so it shouldn't be that spicy. I don't really like too much spice, and I can eat it, and it's fine for me. So there's no seeds. The seeds is what makes the jalapeno spicy. So that is pretty much it to my recipe. So super simple, great for summer. Hope you guys enjoy it.
I made a Mexican cornbread. A friend of a neighbor made it, and my mom loved it. So this recipe is like 50 years old. We've been making it so much for that many years. It's not really complicated. I used a cast iron. It was a huge cast iron pan, and what I did is when I preheated the oven to 450. I put the cast iron pan in it and let it get hot. And then I took it out and I put the oil that it calls for, which is 2/3 of a cup. And I used just a smidgen less than that, but I poured that oil into the pan and let it grease the pan a little bit. So if you used a whole 2/3 of a cup and then poured it back in, you'd be minus a little bit of it, which is fine. And then I dusted the bottom of the pan with cornmeal, and that gets it kind of crunchy, and it doesn't really stick either. But it's, like I said, it's very easy. It's 1.5 cups of yellow cornmeal, and then I use 2 heaping tablespoons of flour, a teaspoon of salt, and 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda. And you mix all of that, and then you add the oil, the eggs, and creamed corn. You use a small 8-ounce can of creamed corn. You mix it all together. I used a an electric mixer to mix it all together. Then I just stir in the cut up vegetables, which I used one huge jalapeno, but I didn't put any of the seeds in. And so to me, it's not very hot, but you know, I didn't want it to be too hot, but you can use 1 to 2 jalapenos and you can put in the seeds if you like it spicy. I typically put in the seeds, but I didn't today. And half a green pepper and a cup of chopped onion. And so you add that into the mixture and then you put in buttermilk and then you pour half of the batter into the, I use a cast iron, but I've also used in the past a 9 by 13 glass Pyrex kind of thing. So you pour in half of the batter, then you sprinkle half of the cheese on top. Then you put the rest of the batter on top and sprinkle the rest of the remaining cheese on top. And then you cook it for, this cooked for like 25 minutes. So it's, you know, it's really easy. And like I said, our family's been making it for years. So I hope you enjoy it.
My son, this was his favorite salad when he was growing up at the house. So I didn't print up a recipe. Got a little frog. It's just a typical tossed salad, but the lettuce, tomato. I have cucumber in here, a little onion. I put in some shredded cheese, sharp cheese. I also took a can of red kidney beans and marinated it in Catalina dressing. And I just marinated that overnight so that the beans soak up the dressing. Put all that together, and then this is what my son really likes. Dorito chips. Nacho, this is nacho flavored. And I usually put these in just before we eat and toss those in. And that's it. If you don't like it, blame my son. His name is Adam.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. This bowl right here is something I made called Hikma salad, coleslaw. Whoa, we're making a mess already. For anyone who's not familiar with a jicama, this is what a jicama looks like. It's also referred to as a Mexican turnip. Doesn't taste like turnip though. It has more of a texture of a raw potato. There's some raw in this bowl right here if anybody wants to try and just see what it tastes like by itself. These are very easy to prepare. They're kind of hard to cut though, so typically what I do is I'll just cut it in half and then lay the cut side down on the table and take a knife and just kind of peel the outside of it off, and then the meat inside of it, you can just dice it up or do whatever you want to with it. This is very simple. It's just this, carrots, different colored sweet peppers, and then the dressing is just lime juice, chili powder, a little bit of honey, and some oil, and you just throw it in a bowl. So I hope you enjoy it. This is what it looks
Quick question for you, Lynn.
like.
When you buy that, do you have to buy it at a specialty store or do they sell it at the public store?
I bought this at Walmart. It's over in the section by like where the cantaloupe and the like the little bins that they have there. There's just a big bin that's full of these. So.
Is it like seasonal?
Sorry?
Is it seasonal? Can you get it all the time?
I'm pretty sure you can get it all the time. I just looked for it to buy it for this class, so I don't, but I would assume they always have it. But there's different sizes. This is probably a medium-sized one. You can get some pretty big ones, or you can get a much smaller one than this. But
Is it traditionally eaten raw?
Usually you see this like in a salad bar, like you'll put it on a salad. So like I said, if you want to try just a raw piece of it and see what it tastes like by itself.
And what is it called again?
A Hikma, it's Jicama.
Oh, okay.
My little recipe is up on the table up here, so yes. Mhm.